All right, we're back. Thanks for staying with us. Planet Green Trees.
Correct.
Episode number 368. Calling it a showdown. We're here now still with Q, who, as I was trying to lay some kind of foundation before all the objections came, as it happens sometimes. We were talking about the dynamics of what's been happening in the state of Michigan in terms of issuing licenses, or in the process of doing that. But at the same time, the city of Detroit has taken on the process of authorizing or licensing zoned buildings to participate in this caregiver center. I understand you're getting involved with one, and that's really exciting.
Yes, which is zoned properly, by the way. So, yeah.
How difficult was it for you to find a property, Q?
Incredibly.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, incredibly difficult. But yeah, this is a property that's been vacant for 10 years, but it was zoned properly. It is zoned properly. So we're going to the BZA to state our case as to why we feel that we should be allowed to open. And so I know that the voters of Detroit have some tough choices to make. I am, however, one of those people who I'm actually grateful that Detroit has some sort of an ordinance, because before I found that property, I petitioned so many local governments and pretty much just got hung up on. They weren't going to do an ordinance. They had no plans on drafting an ordinance. They don't know when they're going to do an ordinance. They're going to wait to see what the state's going to do. You call all these places, and very few actually had something on the books. That Detroit has something on the books, and that Detroit did have a problem. That 300 dispensaries, that's right. A proliferation. So something needed to be done by that. So yes, I'm hoping to be one of the there's a vested interest that I would like to be one of the businesses granted a license. And it's a competitive process, but at least they have a process, and I'm thankful for that.
And the number got down to around from 300 to the projected 50 or something like that, isn't it, that they found? And but that means and we're just talking about those that were in existence that after the zoning laws had been created, that would have been able to remain open just based on the zoning laws without any other approvals or whatnot. So it went from 300 to 50, and many of the restrictions were for too close to a school, too close to a church or a liquor store, as traditional zoning laws have it. I know there's a lot of litigation from by other lawyers who are arguing that the positioning or the description of where the building of interest doesn't fall into that zoning for whatever reason. There's a lot of something that was a church 20 years ago is no longer, it's not really functioning as such.
There are lots of churches there. That was the biggest problem with finding a property for us, was that there are a lot of churches in Detroit.
And schools or parks.
But the thing is, but some businesses have taken it upon themselves to go to those churches and ask those churches if they're okay, and those churches have said that they were okay, and people have gotten variances, even if they were too close to places, if they, ask their neighbors and try to cooperate with the neighborhood.
And I think that really was one of the major issues, I think, with when the proliferation was taking place. It was just a proliferation without contemplation for the community. It was
horrible. I mean, if you really take a look at the macro level, you had people that didn't live in these neighborhoods setting up businesses, not helping the surrounding neighborhood out. And then they wondered why the neighborhood didn't want them there. They had all this excessive traffic coming in, and the traffic, wreaked havoc on the neighborhood, obviously. I certainly wouldn't want that type of traffic in my neighborhood.
Right.
Poorly strategized is a good way to describe it, at least in the proliferation state. And then the city was forced to act because it brought out activism against it for all the wrong reasons. It wasn't even a discussion about the pros and cons of medical cannabis. It was just illegal activity that was, thrashing the community that already, was trying to, rebuild neighborhoods anyways and have safety and no concerns for that kind of activity. And it's good that they've done what they have, and you're right, because it does allow for some kind of guidance. And Detroit, I think, can really, take the lead to whatever extent they want to, and it remains a place where patients can still, get cannabis safely as they've remained open. And with this last announcement by Lara, and let's talk about it a little. We were talking about it in the break. Lara has recently amended. Josh, pay attention. Has recently amended their previous statement that suggested that any existing facilities could stay open until December 15th. They've now given them a date to stay open and apply. And assuming that there are no issues with to avoid facing an impediment to licensure, the applicant must have been operating a proposed medical marijuana facility with the boundaries of a municipality that adopted an authorizing ordinance prior to December 15th, 2017. It must submit a complete pre-qualification application by February 15th with one of the following documents included in the application. Attestation by the clerk or another attestation signed by the clerk with the copies of the ordinance. All right, so all of that is interesting because when you follow that through, what they're saying is that even though you may have a local ordinance and you're applying by that, you have to apply by this time, let them know who you are, and it doesn't, do not promise you anything. You know, they're going to look at it. The previous guarantee that previous behavior wasn't going to be an impediment. It's not as clear this time. In fact, they acknowledge that based on your application and based on other circumstances, they will not hesitate to non-compliance is a ground for disciplinary action, referral to law enforcement for unlicensed activity until a license is received from the state. The operation of proposed medical marijuana facility should be considered a business risk by the operator. This process will allow for unlicensed activity to be reported to LARA and potentially forwarded to the Michigan State Police and the Attorney General, who a few weeks ago said none of this is criminal and none of this is immoral and none of this could be considered against your application. But I don't know. That's
He is such a flip-flopper. He is a real piece of work, and it sounds like Laura is sanctioning the supposed illegal activity. I think people are going to have a hard time getting charges to stick with Laura publishing documents like this, no matter what it says about business risks.
You don't understand somebody.
well. First of all, let's say this from the Detroit perspective. None of that should really apply. I mean, in theory, these are you get the benefit of.
Well, the Detroit Caregiver Centers, the ordinance doesn't contemplate the MMFLA.
Right. It doesn't contemplate any kind of business structure.
That's
It
what
contemplates
that
only
other ballot provision is trying to do.
Okay, let's talk about that in a second. But just so we're clear, the caregiver centers are not designed for, and really don't contemplate the MMFLA. They're
Right.
designed to allow like 10 caregivers to get together, whatever.
But I think that business owners like you see the writing on the wall and know that when the city does contemplate the MMFLA, that those providers will obviously be the ones that the city is going to license.
Right. And what has
And
happened?
that's correct.
And what the city has done is
But
it's
I'm
given.
not going to be operating until I hopefully get a state license.
That's the safest thing I think to do, despite, and I think also.
But I'm in support of these other places staying open.
Of course.
I'm a patient, so I would still like to have some place to go and get something.
It's a totally it's a totally different circumstance because you are entering as with the prospect of this happening. The other people that have entered it and had their footprint, quote unquote, have been doing it and aren't going to stop because they're doing a service.
And
right?
they shouldn't. And you know what? These are people who've taken a risk for 8 years to get this system up and going, and to make sure patients like me have a place to go and get advice and product. So I don't think that shutting them down for 4 or 5 months, but they've been operating for 8 years. So
There's no guarantee they're going to get to reopen. That was always the
Right.
concern, And are they going to? And when they reopen, it's going to be under the auspices of the states telling you how to do it, what it's got to look like, and what it gets. So it's going to. I don't know.
I just feel like it's just a little. I mean, there are so many things that I feel that they could be looking at, and I feel that that's a very small. But what to do with the people who are already operating? Just process their application like you would any other. I mean, to me, that's just. But hey, I'm not in. I'm
No,
not
I understand.
It's been made an issue by Don Bailey.
Yeah.
The one.
Yeah.
But there's an inherent. I can't call it anything but a hypocrisy that. Some of the places of local approval, there are local approval places that have been raided and charged with serious felonies. There's places that never had a chance to be told that the approval locally did not exist. Where someone may have opened up and had some kind of conversation with the clerk and they weren't given a shutdown. So to me, it's like totally bizarre times. I mean, and I don't know. I mean, a lot of risk in any of it, but I think that's the right call. But there's the argument that it's not necessarily designed to conform with this whole process. But
I guess I just have a little faith in Detroit.
well,
that they're gonna, want to, reap the tax benefits of being into the full state program.
Here you go. I got a theory. So first of all, let's talk about the two ballot initiatives that are on, which maybe you have a position on. I know that. Is there two, Jim? Is that what we're
There
talking
is. There's two.
Go ahead, please explain.
So the two initiatives, I'm not real familiar with
Okay.
the specifics
Good
on
news
both,
or good references.
but I do know that one of the initiatives specifically addresses the zoning rules and reduces the amount of space required between a facility and a school or church from 1,000 feet to 500 feet. The other ordinance forces the city to opt into the MMFLA.
There you go. Now,
The issue you're going to run into, and it's not going to stop anytime soon, is that you have individuals like this Wilfred Blackman, who is very, very dead set against medical marijuana facilities. And he's very vocal, and he's well respected. And I know a lot of the existing facilities are running into problems with this man, and he's on a hunt, and he's got some power. So whether or not Detroit ultimately opts in is going to depend on folks coming out in mass and letting the city council know. Because I personally, I hope both ordinances pass. I don't know about you, Q, but I do, but I don't know that will necessarily happen if some of these neighborhood groups and church groups come out and state that it's basically overriding the city council's work. And I'm not sure how people will receive that.
And that's where I kind of have a problem with it. And I just feel that it's a little heavy-handed. I feel that this is a group of people who are trying to force an issue that benefits them and may not necessarily benefit the community. And especially when you have so many other cities that have decided not to opt in. So it's almost like you're forcing people to well, you're forcing people to make the choice to take the power out of the hands of their elected officials and leave it up to a certain group of people, a certain group of business owners. And what I feel is problematic about how the question is written on the ballot is that it doesn't tell people that it changes the boundaries to 500 feet, and that is how can you have this? Because I had a lady called me and she said, tell me, how should I vote on this? And I don't live in Detroit. So I was like, well, read to me the question. Because I was at a meeting when those issues were that whole ballot thing was being fished out or flexed out. And I said, read to me the question. And she read it to me. And I was like, it says nothing about 500 feet. It says nothing about now these businesses will be allowed to be right next to a liquor store or whatever. And she's like, no, it's really confusing as you read it on the ballot. And I feel that it doesn't give people all the information they need to make an informed decision. And if you have an issue with too many dispensaries in Detroit already, this just opens the door to many more dispensaries and not even having a say at the BZA. I'm going before the BZA. I'm nervous about it. I know that I have, a shot like everybody else, but they do approve people and they deny people. And so if they have the process, I'd like to give them the chance to give it a shot.
all right. So that would be a no for the, expanding the zoning per se.
But I really hesitate to tell. Who am I to tell people how to vote?
No, I understand. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
different arguments that are associated with this. Like one is the, don't have limitations and let the market kind of control it. You know what I'm saying? There's the best win and the bad. There's that argument.
There's a Starbucks on every corner, and they all seem to be doing okay. And there were 300 dispensaries in Detroit at one time, and sure, they were all flourishing. But
in a year, none of this is going to matter.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, there's going to be
Hold on.
The issue is now that Detroit is. They've been accepting of these businesses.
Okay, but here's a question. And I think whether they opt in or not is an interesting, because let's assume that someone is licensed and the city doesn't opt in. Okay?
Yeah.
Does it, you've got local approval to keep going. The city's opted not to, but they've approved you to keep going. Does that mean that people are going to shut down because the city didn't opt in?
CCE,
Yeah. That's
What
right.
is CCE?
Continuing criminal
continuing
enterprise.
criminal enterprise.
We don't know if that's, I mean, this is the dilemma. This is the dilemma.
This is also scary.
That's what I'm
What am I
saying.
doing? I should go back to retirement.
The other thing which I think is kind of interesting is why would the city of Detroit participate in this scandal? Like,
Well,
the
they-
city of Detroit probably generates more revenue from cannabis because of the quote unquote existing facilities. No one's paying any tax on it, but if you took whatever the percentages are, 27% that's going to be taken out of those sales, you're talking from the other existing patient base and where the number of sales, the number of revenues being produced, it is in Detroit. So what the program would be that they of whatever that dollar is, they take 27%, they send it. Whereas all the other people are taking their 27%, the Detroit 27% is going to be substantially greater than all the other cities. That's going to be adding to this pool that is then going to be divided up equally. So you're going to have greater revenue being drawn from Detroit that's going to pay for and equalize the programs in these other places. That's patently unfair. Like you're going to be funding, Detroit would be funding the other program,
That's
Happens with education all the time.
happens with
yeah.
education. I'm just saying, so there's a reason why
isn't the splitting of proceeds all pro rata as far as
No.
based on how many licenses? I'm pretty sure that's what the wording says actually. That there's
the various tax-in and revenue that's being generated comes from the amount of sales. You can't stop that.
right, but then there's
Some of it
there's-
goes to the state.
But there's a percentage that goes to the state, and that may be unfair. But the percentage that actually goes to the local municipality is a total pot that's collected and then divided percentage based on how many licenses are in each city municipality.
Yeah, but the rest of the taxes go to higher level than municipal.
Right, the return to the city, the
authorities.
I was just
return to the
responding to
local.
this
There's a
idea
big imbalance.
Yeah, the return to the
that
local
goes to
is
the state.
right. Of what they do proportionately return, it is 3% of the 27%.
I mean,
or something
Detroit
like that.
could benefit a lot from not sharing with the
From
state.
not
So,
sharing with
right,
the rest
and
of
my
the
point,
state.
my point would be like it'd be better if they just
What benefit do they
built their own,
get?
they should build a wall.
Don't
You
get
know,
thrown
they should build their own wall
That's
and
right.
like this is our program and this is
Donald
our-
Trump, is that you?
This is our cannabis program, and we're keeping the revenues.
And it
Right.
should be a hemp.
And we're gonna have the best security, the best safety. We're gonna get the best
Best.
police force. We're gonna
Yeah.
educate, and we're gonna empower the
be a complete
law enforcement
game changer.
community.
That'll
Change
know.
the services.
That'll
I mean,
Wasn't that
Can I
what's his
hear
name?
it? The-
Jeffrey Feiger's campaign statement is he was going to decriminalize marijuana and prostitution in Detroit and just
Yeah.
raise a ton of tax revenue and change everything.
Yeah, because we all know that when you change a law in a city, that the rest of the government agencies in the area respect it, right?
He was going to be the governor.
Detroit's unique though. They have their own police force. They got their own.
I got news
You know-
for you. Marijuana's been decrimmed in Detroit for years, and I can tell you, firsthand experience, it ain't decrimmed in Detroit.
But it's. I don't know.
I'm just saying, man.
Well, that
I bet it's
doesn't
not-
that tie back
I-
into who the AG is.
I would bet though that the.
Yeah.
Like I think if you went over to, I don't know.
does.
I don't know.
It ties into who the AG is, I think.
I wonder if you went to 36 District Court what the number of marijuana arrests are compared to like.
I mean, it's less. I think the Detroit police are certainly more tolerant of it. I'm just saying it's not decriminalized. You can definitely go to jail in the city of Detroit for a joint.
Yes, for sure. They're not recognized. The city of Detroit is not.
No.
They're not charging people who are going through the city or whatever.
Right.
You can't argue that as a.
Just call
There's
Kim
still
Worthy and she
state
takes care of it.
charges.
It's no big deal.
So.
But with a different attorney general, I think that would be different.
I don't know, man. I don't know. But I think, again, in a year, none of this is going to matter.
why? Why do you say that?
Because once the licensing program is in place and licenses are being issued, the whole like quandary right now and the whole reason there's such a rub is that for so many years, like if you wanted to get marijuana in this area, you went to Detroit. That's just where you went. And people didn't like that. And now there's these businesses selling marijuana that aren't owned by the people in the same neighborhoods, and they're not reaping any of the benefits of this.
Okay.
And then on top of all of that,
Yep.
you're now going to start issuing licenses, and other municipalities are going to open businesses up, which are going to compete with the ones in the city of Detroit. So the city of Detroit is going to lose again. And that is why people are pissed. They see it coming.
Well, who's losing? Because you got two different things here. Like, I might agree with the activist that the city of Detroit shouldn't opt in and let the state come in here and ruin the city of Detroit, but for different reasons.
But the problem there is once there's tax revenue that's being generated, if the city of Detroit tries to circumvent that, the state will come in and stop it.
I don't know about that.
And besides,
I think they have a
it really
Home Rules Act.
maybe. But do you really think? I mean, let's look at who's going to be mayor. It's going to be one of two guys, and one looks a lot more likely than the other. And the one that looks likely is no friend of ours, and he would just as well shut them all down.
All right. But you could say that about, I don't know. There hasn't been, I mean, knock on wood, for whatever the period of time, there hasn't been any like crazy Detroit, I don't know. I mean, people have been hit, people,
but there's no license right now. But once there's a state license, the unlicensed facilities are going to get hit.
CCE.
I don't know about that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe
I'll be.
Listen,
I hope I'm wrong,
no.
man.
I would agree with you that they will be, because you're on a list. If the people apply, like if you're looking,
they know where you are and they know who you are.
That's what I'm
The
saying. Like,
pre-application is a confession.
some people may choose to. Some people may choose to just operate under the local ordinance and not even.
Should be Miranda warnings.
Yeah.
Right. Some people just shouldn't be filling out applications. They're just like, we be giving advice about that's just not something they should be doing.
This is a good conversation. We've got to go to a quick break, really quick,
right.
and then we're going to come back. We can continue the conversation. Maybe we can talk about the Attorney General's race. I know we're all excited about that one, and there's been some action in the last week
Maybe
with some new
get
candidates.
a couple callers on the line.
Whispering.
I still want to rant if I
Whisper
if I
can.
have the
Well, maybe
opportunity.
you can rant too. We've
right.
got plenty of time, but let's go to a break, and we'll be right back.